don't often dedicate an entire episode to one chord alone. But then, we don't often come across a chord as amazing as the fully diminished 7th chord. So let's discuss several ways it can function. And some ways it doesn't. You're listening to Music Student 101. And now your hosts, Jeremy Burns and Matthew Scott Phillips.
Hey, Jeremy.
Hey, Matt. Welcome back.
Welcome back. How's it going?
It is going good, man. A lot of stuff has happened since the last episode.
A lot of stuff.
But we can get into my crazy life later on, man. How have you been?
Nothing has happened to me. Literally nothing. I've been grading finals and final projects and final papers and grading, and the grading is over. Well, it was over just in time for me to turn around and start my admittedly lighter but still present summer semester stuff. So,
Right on. Well, actually, kind of the typical prof life.
yeah,
Professor life.
Living that prof life. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, man. Well, here's a kind of a crazy little thing, kind of a cool, crazy thing. I played my first live show, and we talked about this a little bit. But for the people out there, I played my first live show with my band, Jenny's Mixtape. That's the kind of cover band that I'm in.
Right.
Live, in front of people, in a bar.
Wow.
This is with the band Jenny's Mixtape, and this is a place called the Oasis in Birmingham. And you've been
I play there. I'm well familiar.
You know how teeny tiny that place is?
Yeah. Really very small. Very nice people who run it, but it is a small. I kind of think of it as a kind of a giant bullhorn. It's kind of shaped like a megaphone, right? So it's kind of skinniest where the band is, and then kind of widens out a little bit.
Yeah. And the bar staff is great. It was a great experience. But this was 2 days before, 2 weeks after my second vaccination. Okay, so I was not really fully vaccinated by the recommended timeline. So the band's like, "Hey, man, let's invite everybody. Invite everybody you know. We got to pack it out." And I was like, "No, no."
Yeah. This is a mentality very typical for a band playing a gig, and entirely contrary to good COVID protocols.
Right? Yeah. The healthy way was the anti-band way in that case.
Was the anti-band way, unfortunately, and.
But I will say, we still had a great crowd, and I did tell a few people, and I did put up a Facebook post on it. But hey, guys, if you want to help me make it up to them, y'all can go to our, that crazy social media page site where all the crazy people hang out.
That one, yeah.
Yeah. Get up on there and check out Jenny's Mixtape, Jenni, Jenny with an I as in Jennifer. And if you want to support us by liking and sharing, that would be so nice and cool. And then you can see me wearing my Music Student 101 t-shirt.
Nice.
Rocking Out to What I Am by Edie Brickell and the New Bohemians. Are you familiar with that bass line, Matt?
I don't guess so.
It is one of the coolest bass lines out there, in my opinion. Thanks, Brad Hauser. This was actually done on a fretless bass. Brad Hauser was their original bassist and also played for the band Critters Buggin'. And it's a great thing to do. But anyways, we played the show. We had a great time. Just like I expected in a bar. Once the beers come up, the masks come down, and they stay down.
Yeah.
But I had my little fan on the stage, and we had circulation. And despite my earlier anxieties, once we got rolling, everything was just fantastic. And if you guys want to hear a little bit of that, check it out on Disgrace Book.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And yeah, Jeremy and I are both fully vaccinated at this point.
Yeah, and it feels good. But
it's very liberating. I gotta say, it's very liberating. It's just mentally liberating to not be as worried about it.
Absolutely. So dig this, man. And the very next day, I had a mixing gig for a local band called the Pool Hall Special, And this was at a brewery. Now, this brewery had like nothing but open garage doors, so I felt way better. But there was still way more people and way fewer masks, you know.
Right.
And again, this was prior to the CDC, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention guidelines to our blessings to remove the masks. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Still in that period where it's like, okay, I'm vaccinated, but you know,
What does that mean exactly?
what does that mean? Yeah. And the only other thing I'll say about that was it was one of those things where I was mixing with an iPad, and the hardware doesn't have any buttons or knobs on it. It's all the iPad. And so you just better hope that iPad stays alive and doesn't freak out, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
You would think there'd be some kind of board you could plug into it, like a fader patch, like a fader board or something.
There probably is, but I'm sure it's sold separately and, you know.
Priced. Not modestly.
Priced beyond reach, yeah.
Accordingly, yeah.
Yeah, I actually, talking about cool bass lines, I actually have been sort of picking around and learning the bass line to the old TV show Barney Miller.
Oh. Boom.
That one, yeah. I've been messing around with that because apparently when they recorded that, they did like 4 or 5 different versions of that intro song. And so and every couple of seasons they use a different one. So there's different little versions of it to learn.
Oh, they must be pretty subtle.
Yeah, they're real subtle. I mean, it's just like the differences between one take and another, you know. But yeah, so I've been kind of messing around with that lately, and that's been a lot of fun. That's a fun. It's fun to take something like that is sort of classic and sort of already extant. You know, you're not making up your own bass line, but it is there, and then just think, well, you know, how would I play this differently? You know, as befitting my own particular style. You know, and things like that. So I've been having fun with that.
Theme and variations on Barney Miller.
Yeah, and also I had my string quartet get played on the radio just this morning.
Oh, that's big. That's big news.
On Alabama Public Radio. Yeah,
you should have led with that.
I didn't. Yeah, I should have. Well, you know, I tried to get it out on the internet so that it was going to happen, but I only had a day's notice, but it's one of the things that we've used as bumper music on the podcast before, and so
which one?
String Quartet number 4, the first movement. Yeah,
was that the door?
At least I'm sure we have used it. I think we've used just about everything I've ever written at this point. But
just about. Need to write some more.
I'm hard at work on it. But anyway, yeah, that happened, and then the Barney Miller bass line happened, and I've actually also gotten out a little bit. Haven't played any gigs, but I did have gone out to eat a couple of times, you know, and visited with people I haven't seen in over a year. So it's it has been a slow crawl back to normal.
But crawling no less.
But yeah, crawling forward nevertheless.
Moving forward. So yeah, that's awesome. And speaking of that time period where I didn't do much crawling, during that whole COVID period, I think we talked about this too. I said this would be the perfect time for me to go down there and just get really good at my instrument, you know?
Yeah.
It would have, but I just didn't seem to do a lot of that, you know? And
I think I said some very similar things. Like, this would be a great time for me to compose a lot and have just a huge amount of output when this is all over, and also to get good at my instrument, and also to clean my house, and you know, also to, you know, I mean, do a whole bunch of things.
Yeah, we won't even get into the house, man. But as far as music is concerned, I mean, I figure now that I think things are coming back to life a little bit, I feel like it's time to do some makeup work. So I've got a cool plan here. I'm gonna do what I call taking master classes from some of the local greats. You remember we talked about our friend Taylor Prop?
Oh yes.
And I just always loved watching him play, and he can solo like a devil, and his technique is just spot on. And that's some things that I'm lacking in. So I'm going to try and say, and actually I spoke to him on the phone yesterday. It was great talking to him. He said, I think we're going to try and do maybe 4 lessons, maybe an hour long.
Very nice.
The first 2 I want to talk about my technique. And then the second two, I want to talk about philosophies on soloing as a bassist. You know what I mean?
All right. Yeah. Good plan.
And then I'm going to take that to maybe a pianist and take it to a guitarist and just kind of go out there and grind and get me some more experience points.
Yeah.
You know?
That's a great thing to be doing.
So I've already called Taylor and I've already talked to you people about it. So now I'm holding myself publicly accountable to take my master classes.
Yeah, now you're going to have people asking you about it if you don't do it. So
I know. Yeah, how's that going? I better have an answer. And another thing, there's a friend of mine, Sam Pointer, who's recently come out with a new album, and he plays the bass on this album also, but he's really a guitarist. We talked about Sam. He's one of those people. Remember how we said, if you're the best musician in the band, you're in the wrong band.
You're in the wrong band, yeah.
Well, with Sam, I'm always in the right band. He's got some age and experience on me, and he was actually just a phenomenal player when I met him when he was way younger than I am now. So we're gonna do some work together, and we're gonna be playing. I'm gonna help him with this album. Well, he's already recorded the album, but I'm gonna help him put together a band and play some live shows with the music. So I'm gonna at some point play you this bass line, and you can see what I'm talking about. What made me want to move towards this. More on Sam on a coming episode, and more on my progress in my endeavor to do some makeup work for the time that I just didn't do much of that when I should have been. You know what I mean?
Yes, indeed. All right.
Maybe we'll have some updates. And the only other thing I want to say before we get into some of our reviews and stuff and letters is I want to put a call out for listener compositions. You guys are composing out there.
Send us your stuff.
Maybe you guys were busy during the COVID period composing. Send us that stuff. And also people who perform with ensembles that do classical music, such as specifically the Renaissance and what came after the Renaissance? Baroque.
The Baroque.
And then classical and that kind of period. We're going to be doing some more history episodes on that, and we would love to use our listeners' music whenever we can, you know. So
absolutely.
And speaking of our listeners, shall we get into our new review?
Let's do that. So we have a 5-star review from Be For Real. I just
that's what I'm thinking.
Very nice.
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
Who he says start at the beginning. And continues, as a longtime self-taught guitarist, this podcast was perfect when I decided to learn piano in theory. I knew a bunch of scales, but did not know how scales, key signatures, circle of fifths, and everything works together in a systemic way. They broke it down perfectly. Episodes after the pandemic started have a bit too much filler, banter, and a lack of goal or outcome. Well, that was true of our lives, so it's probably true. But geez, these dudes put I don't know how many college courses worth of material in the podcast, so I am a fan. Well, thank you very much, Be For Real. We really appreciate that. How many college courses worth? If I could count it up, a good four courses worth of theory. We've gotten a good 2 courses worth of history so far.
Sure. Yeah.
One or 2 courses of history. Grad level form and analysis. It's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah. I got a few things to say, and it's awesome that even though we got kind of a down vote on the filter, we still got a 5-star review. So
yeah.
Couldn't hurt that much. I want to say that we've talked about this before. They're doing the keyboard. They're using keyboard as their theory instrument, and it really is one of the best to learn theory on. You know,
sure,
or at least it's hard to beat. So if you are interested in hearing how these chords work together and chord progressions, maybe check out the piano. Maybe you can, at least on a very, very basic level, get some of these ideas under your fingers.
Absolutely.
I have a theory on why we digressed a little bit. And you know what? This was in September. So this was actually before we even picked up the show again. This was when we were doing our little Facebook things, you know, episode 90 A, B, and C. So
I remember.
This was in that period.
When we didn't know what the heck to do.
No. But I do know that even after, once we did get back into the show, hell, I hadn't seen you in so long. We probably talked a lot more.
We probably did.
Like we're doing now. But anyways,
Just another human face. Oh my gosh. Yes.
and if not for our digressions, we wouldn't get to hear from our good listeners like Beef Real.
Absolutely. Yeah. So there you go. And we have more faithful listeners to hear from.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to a Patreon patron of ours that I've spoke to recently, our friend Trey Bien, which I believe that is French for very good, is it not?
It is indeed.
Trey is from Mesquite, Texas, which is on the southeastern border of Dallas. We first met Trey some time ago. He shared a most memorable and most unshareable mnemonic device for the Order of Sharps.
Yeah.
I still remember it. That's the point. That's the point. I won't share it. But anyways, Trey says, I play ukulele, mostly baritone ukulele. I got my first uke just over a year ago, and I fell in love with the instrument. My first instrument was drums, which I played in several garage bands during high school and college. In college, I started messing around with the keyboard and guitar. I never got that good with either, but I used to take a cheap keyboard to a guitarist friend's house, and he would give me introductory music theory lessons for cigarettes and beer. I'm sure in the past, in my college years, I've worked for cigarettes and beer.
If any of my students are listening, don't even think about it.
Matt cannot be swayed with cigarettes and beer. What about a good... No, never mind.
Yeah, don't you even think about it either.
Yeah, I know you like good whiskey, but that you might be an expensive date. Limoncello. Anyway, Trey continues. I haven't really played any instrument much for the last dozen or so years before 2020. But those cigarettes and beer payments panned out because it was pretty easy for me to get started and learn the new scales on the uke. I don't have any defined plans for where I want to take my music, and that's okay, in my opinion. I have a dream of having a family band, but my wife and daughter aren't super keen on joining. Maybe if I'm lucky, I can finagle my dad into brushing off his decades dormant harmonica or clarinet chops, and we'll have some father and son jams. Kind of cool, huh?
Yeah, Trey didn't necessarily ask for advice, but go to your local music shop. Most of them have bulletin boards where musicians post. You can post a little sign that says "uke player looking for a music project," or you can look at the other things that other people have posted. It's a great way to meet new musicians in your area.
You know what I've always, and that's a very good point. But you know what I've always been curious about also on that note is acts that are like husband and wife that play, or any kind of family act. You have to give them you have to wonder how easy it is to pull off because within the band dynamic you have struggles, power struggles, and personality differences.
Absolutely, personality struggles.
With sometimes power struggles. And then within a marriage, you have sometimes personality struggles, sometimes power struggles. Just any relationship, I feel like is that. So almost it seems like you're doubling your chances if you do work, music, and family life with the same people. You might be doubling your chances. I might just be.
I have never played in a music project with a family member or significant other, so. I can attest to what it's like from that perspective. I have played in musical projects that had husband and wife partners as part of the larger project, and boyfriend, girlfriend kind of things. It is definitely a more complicated dynamic, in my experience, when that has happened.
Right, yeah. So anyway, Trey continues. Good luck with that, my friend. I mean, yeah. I know people make it work. I know it works.
People do definitely make it work.
Okay, moving on. Trey continues. My favorite albums tend to be albums that I found confusing at first listen. I think that's because such albums spark my curiosity and my need to understand what the appeal is. As such, I'm very much into Pink Floyd's The Wall, especially Disc 2. And he says he acquired that by picking it off the ground at a park. Nearly passed it up, assuming it would be an AOL free trial.
Okay.
What a find. That is some good stuff. He mentions Crash Test Dummies. God shuffled his feet. I don't care what everyone else says. I love that.
Yeah, that's a different song than the one he's talking about, though.
The album is God Shuffled His Feet.
Maybe I don't remember the name of the album, but one of the songs on that album is called God Shuffled His Feet. God shuffled his feet and looked around. Yeah.
I'm not even familiar with that one, but the is the song that I'm talking about.
The 4M, as it was called back in the day.
Uh-huh. And then he mentions Magnetic Fields, love songs, and then Tchaikovsky's Piano Concerto. And so he's found all these CDs, and he just gets sparked by curiosity and often finds some of the best little nuggets in there. And then he also mentioned Outkast, Speaker Box, and The Love Below. And The Love Below features the song Hey Ya. And I'm actually, as soon as we get done with this recording, I need to sit down and solidify what I think I know of the bass line from that song because I got to cover it.
Good plan.
Are you familiar with that one? Yeah, and the bass line is like that kind of thing. So it's like 1, 4, 5, 6. You know?
Yeah.
But then there's this little breakdown in the middle where they're saying "shake it like a Polaroid picture," and because I can play this on Rocksmith and it shows you actually the notes to play, and it's so much different than I thought it was. He's using all these inversions and all this crazy stuff. So where you start off on G, he's actually doing he's starting off with a D note on G, so it's like boom, 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 boom. And so it just kind of flips it around and just makes it sound like a different chord progression almost, but it's pretty cool.
Inversions.
Yeah. But anyways, we should probably move on. I just wanted to say thanks again, Trebian, for your Patreon patronage.
Indeed.
I'll let you know how that Hey Ya goes.
And then we also have yet another new Patreon patron from Oslo, Norway. Olav Torvund. Thank you so much, Olav, who wrote to us. And Olav says, I found your podcast when searching for podcasts on music theory. I did as I usually do when I find podcasts that are not day-to-day news-oriented. I started at the beginning.
Again.
We recommend that. Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Around episode number 60, I decided to join Patreon. I find $5 a month to be a very reasonable tuition fee for such a good content. Yeah, you won't get that at any university where I actually teach, I promise. I am a law professor at University of Oslo who will retire in a few years. Oh, congratulations. Mm-hmm. I have been playing guitar for 50 plus years. I also played trumpet in the school's marching band when I was young. For the last 2 decades or so, I have not really had much time to play. I have decided to spend more time with the guitar. Going back to what I used to play is not very inspiring, as it is mostly a reminder of how my playing has deteriorated. Yeah, I can sympathize, believe me. It may be a professorial inclination that I do not only want to know how, but also understand why. Professorial inclination. There's a good way of putting it.
You can relate to that, Matt?
Oh, yes. Oh, believe me. Which is why I'm interested in music theory. I like the way you present and explain theory. I also like the podcast format, or rather the audio format. Music is, after all, about listening. You know, that's a good point. I never thought about it that way.
Right?
I also like the format where you two are discussing the issues at hand in a monologue, be it oral or in print. We often tend to set our brain on idle, taking in what is presented without really thinking. When it is a dialogue, we have to get more involved and engage our brain more. That's actually a pedagogical technique going back centuries. You know, we've talked about Fuchs in his book on counterpoint in the beginning of the Renaissance, right?
Yeah.
So far, I have only been listening through 60 plus episodes, but have not listened very carefully. When I catch up with you, then I will go back and listen more carefully to some of the episodes. I have to admit that not all of them are relevant to me. I am not going for a second career as music tech or stagehand when I retire from my current position in 4 to 5 years. Oh, really?
Save that back.
I have always been interested in music tech, but now I will spend my time on the music. Keep up your good work. Well, thank you so much, Olav. There's a lot of good stuff to unpack there. A lot of good philosophy about a dialogue, about dialogue as pedagogy, which is, and the professorial inclination to want to understand why, not just know how.
Yeah, and in subsequent emails, Olav has been talking to me about he's noticed our interest in music in the brain, and and he's sent me some cool resources, and I think he'll probably be looking forward to an episode that we do on that, because I
can't wait. I can't wait.
Brain.
That fascinates me to no end. So
yeah, so stay tuned for that.
Indeed, but now it's on to this episode, right?
Yes, the subject at hand, which is
the fully diminished 7 chord.
We just came out from an episode 98 where we were doing harmonic progression. We were listening. It was an ear training episode, and that was for the 7 of 3. Oh.
The 7 of 3 and the 7 of 6, wasn't it?
The medians. Yes. So I thought that was really, and I think that we've just been leading up to all this tension building up, and finally we're gonna wrap it up. I think our discussion of the fully diminished 7th chord and some of its possibilities.
Indeed. Well, we've been, like you say, we've been talking about the 7th chord for a while, and we have mentioned this. We don't normally do this where we spend an episode just talking about a single chord, right? We tend to talk about chords of dominant function or chords of a particular construction or something. But we don't normally spend a whole lot of time talking about just a single type of chord like this. But we felt like it was a good thing to do for this episode because the fully diminished 7 really is an extremely unique chord and uniquely versatile chord. There's so much you can do with it, and there's so much almost, I hesitate to use the word baggage, but there's so much implications to the fully diminished 7 chord's use. Now, mind you, I'm talking about the fully diminished 7 chord, not the half diminished 7 chord, which is of course very useful, but kind of in a more limited, functional tonal harmony kind of sense. First of all, I should say what I'm talking about is a 7th chord, really, right?
With the TH.
Not necessarily scale degree 7, although that is a diminished chord, but the fully diminished 7th chord. So a fully diminished 7th chord is a diminished triad. You want to play us a diminished triad, Jeremy?
Here's a C diminished triad. We have a C, go up a minor third to E flat, go up another minor third to, I guess what would be G flat.
G flat, yeah. So C diminished triad, go back and review our episode on triads, but this is a minor third above the root and then a diminished 5th above the root.
So we got our minor third and our diminished 5th. And then all together.
Yeah. And for a fully diminished 7th chord, we then add a diminished 7th above that.
Which I guess in this case would have to be B double flat, right?
B double flat, yes, indeed. If you did it right, it will be a minor third, 3 half steps below the root again at the higher octave.
The root in this case being C, and yes, we went down. So from C to B flat to B double flat.
B double flat, aka A natural, right? Also known as A natural, B double flat. They are enharmonic equivalents, but yeah.
So there's that, and then there's the half diminished, which we're not going to be talking about.
Which
today,
we're not
right?
going to be talking about. The difference there is the half diminished would have a diminished triad plus a minor 7.
Right. So it would be the same.
Not the fully diminished 7, but just a minor 7, just a flat 7.
So it would be the same triad, in this case C, E flat, G flat, but instead of that B double flat, we're going to have the B flat.
Yeah, there you go. And that's a half diminished 7th chord.
Just a little sweeter, just a little bit less tense, but not a lot. You know what I mean? There's this, and then there's this. So
yeah, that fully diminished is a little tangy, isn't it?
It is. But that is the chord of the day.
Yeah, and so like I said, the half diminished 7 chord is certainly useful, and certainly a great functioning chord, especially when you start getting into chromaticism in your music and sort of spicing your music up with chromaticism. The half diminished 7 comes in handy real fast. The fully diminished 7 chord, though, has a lot of very interesting uses that is worth talking about. We should say, to begin with, that the fully diminished 7 chord is never a diatonic chord.
It is never a chord that is a part of the scale of the key that you're working in.
Right. At least not when you're talking about the major and minor. Now, maybe there's some mode or some alternate scale out there where it is. I'm sure there is at some point. Somebody could maybe even tell us. But in terms of at least the major and minor scale, the fully diminished 7th chord is not diatonic to either one of those scales on any scale degree. So you are necessarily talking about some level of chromaticism. Usually a fair amount.
Right.
Usually a fair amount.
You also mentioned that it is considered to be a symmetrical set.
Right, yes. Thank you for reminding me. It is in fact, one of the reasons it has so many great uses is that it is what we call a symmetrical set. Meaning that because you'll notice this is all minor thirds, right? So if we just stay with the C fully diminished 7, we go from C to E flat, minor third. We go from E flat to G flat, minor third, right? We go from G flat to B double flat, minor third. If we were to switch the enharmonic equivalence, that would be F sharp to A, minor third, right? And then we go from B double flat, also known as A, back up to C, minor third.
So.
Yeah. So, this quality, we go minor third, minor third, minor third. It's minor third straight up. So what we're doing is we're taking the chromatic set, the set of all 12 notes, and basically dividing that into 4 equal parts. Right, 4 different parts that are 3 half steps long. C to E flat is 3 half steps, would be 1 part. E flat to G flat is 3 half steps, that would be the second part. G flat to B double flat is the third, and then B double flat back around to C. If you're thinking of it like a clock face, right, which I would.
Sure, yeah.
Is B double flat back to C is the 4th part. And this is why we call it a symmetrical set, because there's symmetry there. Make sense?
Absolutely. Another fun thing you said, in almost the same breath, you said it is responsible for 20th century music, and yet also kind of responsible for the breakdown of harmony as we know it.
Right. So if you haven't been keeping up with recent trends in European classical music for the last 100 years, here's what's been going on. Tonal harmony, this whole system of chords that function, moving, a 2 moving to a 5, moving to 1 and all that, it all completely fell apart. The house just fell down on that, and composers just stopped using that at all. And in a way, the fully diminished 7 chord was responsible for that. And we'll maybe get into how and why that is true a little bit as the episode moves forward. Suffice to say this, that because the fully diminished 7 chord is symmetrical, right? Because there's no one of these parts of the chromatic scale that's bigger than the other one.
Yeah.
We cannot say for certain which of those 4 notes is in fact the root of the chord.
Yeah, I love that.
Not because we don't know, but because any of them potentially could be. So, to show you what I mean, Jeremy, you spelled that chord as a C fully diminished 7. C, E flat, G flat, B double flat, right? Well, if I started that note chord on B double flat, But I instead decided to call it by the name of its enharmonic equivalent, A. Right? Then I would have A, and I would have C, and I would have E flat, and I would have G flat, which is now an A fully diminished 7th chord. Now, mind you, I did not change any notes.
Right. So C fully diminished. Just for example, just to compare the two of them, we had C fully diminished.
Yep.
With the C in there. And then we just moved everything down a third for the A fully diminished.
Well, yeah, you just dropped the B double flat down an octave. You didn't even move anything.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, we're using the same 4 notes.
Yeah.
Is my point. To make E flat fully diminished, you're going to have E flat, G flat, B double flat, and what's the next one? D double flat, aka C.
Yeah.
So E flat fully diminished. We're still using the same 4 notes. So and take my word for it, G flat fully diminished 7 is going to work out exactly the same way.
Yeah.
So, what is the root of which one of these potential roots is the root? Well, any one of them can be. And it is this role that has led to so much of what the fully diminished 7 has been used for.
So many possibilities.
Indeed.
But you can't just look at the chord by itself and determine what kind of chord or what the root is until you kind of listen to what happens, before it and after it, right? I mean,
yeah. At the very least, you really don't know if you're what to make of any fully diminished 7 chord until you figure out what's happening afterwards, and then you almost sort of have to analyze it in retrospect. There, yeah. But let's look at an example of what I mean by that. The secondary 7 chord, by the way, as a initial roll of the 7th chord, right?
Okay. Yeah. So this will be kind of the first cool thing that we noted that it can do.
Cool thing that we noted. First cool thing that usually gets talked about, I suppose. So, loyal listeners who like to keep up with our theory episodes probably remember our discussion on secondary 7th chords, right? Which was the 7th chord that is taken from outside of the major or minor scale we're in to briefly tonicize a diatonic note. For example, a 7 of 5, which would be a 7th chord that is designed to resolve to the 5 of the scale we're in.
So key of C, right? 1, 4, 5, 1.
There's C, yeah.
All right.
And so in C, you may have an F sharp diminished triad, let's say.
Okay.
Start simple. Which would be 7 of 5, right?
Yep.
And then that would resolve up to 5, G.
Like that. Okay.
5, 5, 7, what have you. And then that 5, 7 would go on and do what it likes to and resolve to C, let's say. So back to 1. And this is a secondary 7 chord. And if you made that a secondary half diminished 7 chord, so a 7 half diminished 7, where you had F sharp, A, C, and E, it's still most likely going to resolve to that G.
So that can go to okay. So again, the triad F sharp diminish 5 of 5, 7 of 5 going to 5. And now you're saying making it a half diminished, so F sharp, A,
C,
and then
E.
Okay. There's a half diminished.
And that will probably also resolve to 5.
Okay.
And then back to 1. There you go. Let's say we make that F sharp half diminished and F sharp fully diminished, though.
Okay.
So we have F sharp.
Mm-hmm.
We have A.
Mm-hmm.
We have C. And we have E flat.
Uh-huh.
So now we have this fully diminished 7 chord, and as we've already noted, this doesn't necessarily have to resolve to G.
Mm-hmm.
Because because of the fact that any one of those 4 notes could be the root of that chord,
Mm-hmm.
we can resolve a half step up from any one of those notes.
Right.
So we could resolve F sharp to G.
Mm-hmm. So we could just go right back to this.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Or we could resolve A to B flat, a half step above the A that is in that chord.
So same chord, same voicing.
Mm-hmm.
But instead this time we're going to go to B flat. Yeah.
And, we would change the voicing to make that a little smoother if we absolutely had to, right?
Sure.
And we probably would.
And I might do that in post.
Yeah, or what about to C sharp minor? From C up to C sharp minor.
So, you're saying from... Only this time it's going to go to a C sharp minor chord.
Yeah, resolving a half step above the C note that's in that diminished chord.
Yep.
Or, last but not least, we could go from that very same fully diminished... We haven't changed the fully diminished 7 chord now. We could resolve it to E, minor or major. Doesn't even really matter. Let's do minor.
Okay. Same chord, same start, and this time we're going to go E minor.
Yeah. So the point of all this being, we can resolve that fully diminished 7 chord a half step above any one of those 4 notes that are in the chord.
Yeah. Same chord, 4 possibilities.
So was this a 7 fully diminished 7 of 5? Or was this a fully diminished 7 of flat 7?
It was when we went to flat 7.
It was when we went to flat 7. Was this a fully diminished 7 of Neapolitan, aka flat 2?
It was when we went to D flat.
Yeah, exactly. It was when we went there. So, do we call this 7 of 5, 7 of 3, 7 of Neapolitan? You have to look at where it went.
Yeah.
All we know is it's a fully diminished 7 chord until we go forward and analyze the chord that comes after it.
Yeah.
And then we can determine not only was it 7 of 5 or 7 of 3 or what the heck is going on, but we can also then say what inversion it was in, right? Because only then do we have a quote-unquote root by which to base whether we were in first, second, third, or root first, second, or third position.
Right.
Yeah.
I think last night I asked you, can we safely call this the skeleton key chord?
It's kind of a skeleton key chord, yeah. It can kind of go anywhere.
It can kind of go anywhere. It can unlock this portal to whatever next... you can get to pretty far away keys pretty quickly with this portal.
Yeah, well, speaking of unlocking some portals, so as a secondary 7th chord, it is, as you can see, very versatile. Like I said, it will always require some chromaticism, usually a fair amount, actually, to get a fully diminished 7. At least a couple of notes are going to have an accidental most of the time.
Yeah. I mean, if we just look at C, for example, the key of C major, the least chromatic would be the 7 chord, the 7 of 1, right?
Right. B, D, F, and then the A flat.
Only this flat would be the 1 chromatic thing, but that's not even a secondary 7. That's just the 7 of 1, right?
Right.
So anytime you go and add another secondary, you're probably going to be subject to more chromaticism.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's a fairly chromatic chord. You bet. One of the more chromatic chords, actually.
It'll catch your eye in a score, right?
Do what?
It'll catch your eye in a score.
It will absolutely, yeah. Something crazy's going on. It'll catch your eye in a score. Something crazy's going on. Some of those crazy things, you were mentioning, it's kind of a skeleton key. It can unlock a portal to practically anywhere, and This is absolutely true, especially when it's used as a common chord of a modulation. So, if you like, we can stick with our same example with the F sharp A C E flat.
Oh, I love that.
So not only can we briefly tonicize those keys, but we can actually go to those keys, right? Mm-hmm. We can actually construct what would be a 7 of 5, and just rethink of it as a 7 fully diminished 7 of 1, aka just a 7 fully diminished 7. Mm-hmm. Yeah, in the key of G.
Okay.
And now we're in G.
Shall I try to demonstrate that?
Yeah, yeah. If you want to play like 1 4 1 5 1 in C, and then the chord, and then 1 5 1 in G, that might be fun.
So we got it's key of C.
1 4 5 1. We're in C.
Okay, and so you want to say we're gonna go to the 7 of 5. So
yep.
We'll go 1 4, and then the 7 of 5. But I need to have this fully diminished thing, and then to 5. And now we're in G.
D major, yeah, and then 5 in G. And now we're in G major. Beautiful is daylight, right?
Interesting. Yeah.
And because of this great versatility, remember, we can also do the same thing and end up in B flat.
Okay. Shall I try that?
Let's try that.
What if we did the same little intro where we go 1 4?
Yeah.
So So 1 4, and then we gotta get this chord, same chord. I'm sorry. And then to B flat. And then now that we're in B flat, we want to say F, right?
F.
Yeah.
Or so that was we started in C and we ended up in a very far away key in B flat, right? The flat 7.
2 flats away.
Yeah, 2 flats away. We could end up in the Neapolitan. We could end up in D flat major or C sharp minor. Doesn't matter, you know.
So back to C. And then this time we're gonna go 1 4, and then we just scrunch it up. Aha, there we are. Okay, one more time all together. So, key of C. I knew this wasn't going to be easy. I knew I was going to have a little bit of trouble with this. And we got maybe one more episode where we're doing this, and then, Matt, I'm going to release the keyboard, give you the keyboard again.
I don't think anybody really wants that, but okay.
Okay, so, I'm sorry. So, 1, and then I'm going to go 4, but this time, we're going to say 7 of Neapolitan. Yeah, and then just drive that home. D flat to A flat to D flat.
Yeah. And then take my word for it, we could end up in the key of E major or minor in exactly the same capacity.
Right.
Yeah. Which,
same method.
the key of E major is 4 sharps, right? That's 4 spots on the circle of 5th away from C major.
Yeah, actually, let's hear how that goes then, just for fun. So we got C, F, and then this crazy chord to E major. Wow.
Yeah.
4 sharps away.
Pretty nice, huh? Pretty cool.
That's what I'm talking about, that portal, the magic portal.
Oh, and we haven't even scratched the surface because we're still just using it as reinterpreting it as a 7 of 1 in the new key.
Yeah.
Imagine 7 of 5 in C major, interpreted as 7 of 2, right?
Yeah.
We're now going to end up in the key of I guess whatever G is the 2 of F, or reinterpret it as 7 of 6. Now we're in E flat.
Yeah.
Imagine reinterpreting it as 7 of, as 7 of Neapolitan, right? Now we're in F sharp. We're in the key of the root chord. You see, so you can do whatever. You can really the modulatory possibilities truly get pretty endless. So when you're analyzing this, was it 7 of 5 or 7 of 6 or what was it in the old key? It almost doesn't even matter, right?
Yeah.
It almost doesn't even matter to say. I mean, because you can't really know that until you look ahead to see where it was going. Well, if where it was going was into a new key, you can't even really say was this 7 of 5 or 7 of 6 or something. You almost just have to say, well, it was a 7 chord. Yeah. That we then turned like a skeleton key and ended up in a new place altogether.
So it's almost like you can't really even you got a good bet guessing what it is based on the chord that comes after it. But if I went to that G, if I was in the key of C, and I did this 5 of 5, or what I think is 5 of 5, or I'm sorry, 7 of 5, and I did go to G, but maybe we're not in the key of G. You know what I mean? G could be, what did we say? G could be the
Could be the anything. Could be the 2, could be the 6, could be the 4, could be the
4D, yeah.
Well, I don't guess it could be the 2. It'd have to be minor. It could be the 5 of 5.
Yeah. Yeah, it could be a 5 of 5 in a different key. So you kind of have to keep on listening.
Yeah, it really depends on where it went. So do you start to see why this is kind of becoming a problem for our sense of harmony? Yeah, harmony is all about chords being led by their natural tendencies into a particular direction, and that direction is flowing towards tonic, right?
Yeah.
This doesn't really flow towards tonic. It can flow towards a lot of things that are a potential tonic. Mm-hmm. So already we start to see how this is kind of messing with our notion of what harmony is and does. Mm-hmm. Because it's not really a particular. I mean, this type of symmetry, is it really breaks down the system. Mm-hmm. So as a secondary 7th chord, it is extremely versatile. Mm-hmm. As a modulatory 7th chord, it is even more versatile.
Which is what we just did.
Mm-hmm. And then there is something called a common tone fully diminished 7 chord. Mm-hmm. So what this does, this is a method of tonic prolongation, okay? Which is just to say that this is a way of being on the tonic chord and just sort of stretching it out.
Yeah.
And stretching it out over time and making the tonic chord last longer in a way. By what we do is we go from the tonic chord.
This could be in G.
Let's be in G, okay.
Okay.
And then we go to a fully diminished 7 chord that keeps the tonic note. So that is the common tone, right?
So in this case, G is our common tone.
Yep.
So I guess I would just build a chord off of that, huh?
Build a fully diminished 7 chord off that. So you end up with G, B flat, D flat, and E flat.
So G, B flat, D flat, F flat.
Yes, F flat. Sorry. B flat, G, D, and E, and then you just go right back to the G chord.
Okay, so we're just kind of hanging out. We're just kind of hanging out in G, and then you're saying was basically. Ooh, okay.
Isn't that pretty?
I've heard that before.
Oh yeah,
One more time. So we're still we're in theory or in function we're still in the 1 while we're doing that.
In theory or in function, we're still in the 1. Yeah. How would you analyze that? Well, you wouldn't analyze that as a 7 of anything. Mm-hmm.
Because it returns back to where it came from.
Right. Yeah. My students just typically say I have them say CT. Common tone diminished 7.
Okay. Common tone diminished 7. So the CT common tone chord.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I like that. That's what you would put over if you're analyzing it in the paper,
Yes.
on the paper.
And this is used to prolong the tonic in the way we just described.
Uh-huh.
We can also use it in the same way to prolong the dominant. That's something that happens.
Uh-huh. Okay. So you want to try that?
Yeah, let's try that.
So in this case, we would go C. And if we go to the 5, we would actually make this a diminished chord, huh? Oh, wow. Okay.
And then back to the 1.
Okay.
Pretty nice, huh?
Yeah, maybe I should do that again just to be sure. So we did 1. Starting to get lost here. What do we do again?
1, 4.
Okay, so 1, 4,
5.
5, and then we make that one diminished.
Yeah.
I can make that 7.
And then 1.
Nice.
Yeah, pretty cool, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then imagine using a common tone diminished 7 chord that you then reinterpret as some kind of 7 chord in a new key.
Okay. Well, we'll take that back to the G then. So we got the. Now we move on to a new key, or what?
Yeah.
Or okay. Well, how would that? Explain that a little bit more. I'm sorry.
Well, first you have to pick your new key, right?
Uh-huh.
So the simple thing would be G, and then the common tone diminished 7 chord.
Okay, so we got G, and then we make that a big fully diminished 7 chord.
And now you've got options. Any note that's a half step above one of the notes you're playing.
I see. Let's go into the Neapolitan.
And then just 1, 5, 1 in the new key to sort of drive it home.
A flat, E flat. Okay.
Yeah, and you reinterpreted your common tone diminished 7 as a 7 of 1. Again, you could reinterpret it as reinterpret your common tone diminished 7 chord as a 7 of something else in some key.
Any of the other 3 possibilities within that chord to follow that chord.
Right. But that chord that you're going to doesn't have to be 1 in the new key, right? Like we were saying before, it could be 5 or 4 or 6 or anything.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So
yeah. So I mean, you could really you can start to see you can use this chord to get from anywhere to anywhere, really. But all you have to do is sort of think your way through it.
But in terms of as being used as a common tone fully diminished 7 chord, we're talking about 2 different things. First of all, we talked about the prolongation of the tonic.
Of the 1 chord, yeah.
And then second, we talk about as a modulation, even though you're using what could be the very same chord.
Yeah.
But this time we go elsewhere. Yeah.
Yeah. So to put it succinctly, a common tone diminished 7 chord will always resolve back to the chord that created it, except for when it doesn't.
Yeah, okay.
Fun stuff, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Yeah, we're getting into some pretty deep theory at this point. This is some pretty sophisticated chromatic contrapuntal stuff going on.
Let this not be the first episode you listen to in Music Student 101.
Please.
You will hate us. You will drive your car into a pole.
You will drive your car into a pole. And not because we digressed.
No, this will be all theory. The reason most people love us.
Believe it or not, I'm digressing a little bit. But anyway, okay. So that is the fully diminished 7 chord as a common tone diminished 7 chord, a very, very common, no pun intended, use of this particular chord. They can also sort of lead you to anywhere.
Yeah. Right. So before we move on to the next thing, I just on this kind of note about enharmonic, or I do have a question about enharmonic modulations using the diminished 7th chord. Chapter 25 in Cascapane, I read the following, and I want you to try and we'll break it down and see if we can explain it better. The enharmonic spellings of these chords are often used for the benefit of the performer or the reader. What is meant by that?
That basically just means that if you're playing piano, you'd much rather see A natural than B double flat. So they're often spelled in whatever way is most convenient in the context of the score, what key you happen to be in at the particular time, to make it easiest to figure out what notes you're dealing with.
Oftentimes, if someone reading a piece of music sees a sharp accidental, they usually can gather it's going to move up a half step, you know?
That's the thing, too, yeah.
So it kind of it kind of informs the reader and a little more clearly what they need to do. But that's inaudible to the listener, right?
That's inaudible to the listener, yeah. That's just purely notational considerations.
Okay, I got that. So the next line, however, enharmonic reinterpretations are audible because they reinterpret a chord in a new key as a part of a modulation.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I don't like that sentence because no, it's no more audible. I mean, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Inharmonic respellings are never audible. But
I didn't think so. Yeah.
that's a bit of an awkward sentence. Sorry, Dr. Koska and Dr. Payne, that it kind of is. What they're saying, I believe, is sort of akin to what we've been saying, is that you don't know what to call this particular fully diminished 7th chord until you figure out where it went. You know, until it figure out where it took you, where what road it led you down. So if it just resolved to the 5 and then everything carried on normally, then that was probably a 7, fully diminished 7 of 5. Moving on, right? If it looked like a 7 diminished 7 of 5, but then you ended up in the key of D major or something, then turns out that was probably a 7 fully diminished 7 of 4 in the key of D, right?
Right.
So what they mean is, while those enharmonic spellings aren't, they are audible in the sense of, they can lead you somewhere else that is definitely audible. If you modulate to the key of D major, that is audible.
Yeah. Do you have any recommendations where, if you could go back in your little ear library, can you think of some good romantic period composers who use this kind of technique a pretty good bit?
You bet. So, there is a cycle of art songs by Franz Schubert called Dichterliebe.
Okay.
Famous. And it's German for love songs. Look it up.
Lovely.
All over the place. But anyway, look that up. It has these kind of fully diminished 7 chords all over the place. And other examples that we will continue talking about. There is the E minor prelude, Chopin's E minor prelude, which is also a great example of the use of versatile use of diminished 7 chords. More an example of what we're about to talk about than what we've just talked about. But look at Rachmaninoff, and you'll find this. Look at Rimsky-Korsakov, and you'll find diminished 7 chords used in this way. Brahms, certainly.
At one point, I had a complete infatuation with Gabriel Fauré's Requiem. And it is the Agnus Dei section. And I remember trying to analyze that, looking at the chords. And back then, before I know what I know now, I was seeing all these diminished chords, and none of them really resolving where they needed to. And I want to say that he was doing a lot of that stuff too.
It's possible. Gabriel Fauré was early 20th century, right?
I think so.
Yeah, it's very possible something like that was going on. I would have to get in there and dig into it myself, but yeah. This is why these chords can be so confusing, And again, this is why this is sort of breaking down tonality a little bit, right? These things don't work the way chords are supposed to work in harmony.
Yeah.
Chords are supposed to have a function, and you can shift maybe a little bit, but by and large, chords are supposed to be leading you to another chord. These things are very, very ambiguous.
Yeah. Hopefully, eventually to home base.
But what is even home base once you hit a fully diminished 7 chord?
It gets a little foggy.
Gets a little fuzzy.
A little blurry.
Yeah. So anyway, okay. So that is modulatory principles of the diminished 7 chord. Common tone, diminished 7 chords. The common fully diminished 7 chord is modulation. My favorite one is next, and this is the one in which you just sort of have to struggle with it and eventually give in to the reality of what's going on here.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the fully diminished 7 chord as a contrapuntal element.
Yeah, this is where you just kind of throw your hands up and say, well, I really don't know what's going on here. So I'm going to call it something that just happens. Am I right? Was that the inaccurate description?
Something that just happens, pretty much. So this is a fully diminished 7 chord that is created by means of counterpoint, which is to say the bass voice ascends chromatically, or one of the other voices is ascending or descending chromatically, or two voices are ascending by a certain interval chromatically. Ergo, what you create is what some theorists have called a simultaneity. A chord that has a traditional spelling, aka, well, that's a fully diminished 7 chord, or that's a dominant 7 chord or something, but that does not resolve to anything, was not approached by anything. And, the line keeps on ascending or descending or whatever it was doing, and the chord goes away. And that was just a chord that happened. Quite often, this is a fully diminished 7 chord that does this. And this is not a fully diminished 7 chord that functions. It has no function of any kind. Function implies a resolution to something, or at the very least, a prolongation of something. Right.
Okay. Or movement towards a predominant function. You're still moving towards.
Right. Yeah. It's leading you towards a predominant chord, which will in turn have the function of leading you towards a dominant chord. And these chords just aren't doing that. They are coming about, and they exist. They're there, but they are coming about because, like I said, the bass line is rising chromatically, and once you hit that A sharp, of your chord, then you have created a fully diminished 7 chord, and then it continues rising and it goes away. And this is again what some theorists have called a simultaneity. But the point is that this is a purely functional, a purely contrapuntal element. It is the chromatic motion of the line that matters, not the fact that you happen to have created a fully diminished 7 chord, even though you did happen to create a fully diminished 7 chord.
So how does that relate to the term simultaneity? A simultaneity is something that happens at the same time as something else, right? Or
right. So what is happening at the same time are the 4 notes that created this fully diminished 7 chord. Mm-hmm. So it is a contrapuntal simultaneity. The 4 voices of our texture came together to create this chord at this point. But this is not. But this chord does not function. and it seems like I said, that is a word Casca Payne totally made up. Well, didn't make, but arbitrarily decided to use in this context. So that they would have a word that they could put in bold-faced type and make students memorize the definition of, and
Well, yeah, right. But I think in this case, so you're saying it is kind of a word, but kind of a word that they came up with too. Well, how else would you describe? I mean, just there's no other word, right? I mean, it's just a
shrug emoji.
Shrug emoji. Yeah, this chord, and it seems like the instances have to be rare because, I mean, if you have a fully diminished 7 chord, well, you already have 4 chords that if you go to actually 4 chords and their major and minor versions, 8 chords really, that you can go to, and it would be functional. And then you have the prolongation where it's messing around with the 1 chord. And then so where else could you go where it wouldn't have the function, Okay, so what if I have my C diminished chord and I just go to D major? Oh, but there's a common tone in there. Does it make a difference if there's a common tone afterwards in the following chord?
I will say this. You are still You are still thinking in terms of harmonic function.
I gotta have a function. I gotta know what's gonna do something.
It is an ingrained part of your mentality.
Let's play for our listener. Give me an example where I can play, if I can, God willing, when this kind of thing might happen. What is an example of this kind of situation? I just sit down and write this down first, huh?
I have to figure this out. Okay. So why don't we be in C?
Okay. C major.
Why don't we move to the 4/6 chord, ergo the 4 chord and first inversion. So you're going to play A in the bass.
Okay. So from C, we're going to go to A or F major with an A in the bass.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
And now you're going to move that bass line to A sharp.
And then straight to this diminished chord. This is the A sharp diminished.
And now go to 5/6. So A sharp moves up to B and a G chord above it.
Okay. Because we're walking up chromatically. And then to 1.
Yeah.
So this chord really didn't... When we went to this 5 chord, there's nothing that leads into it. There's no leading tones to the 5. I guess
matter of fact, scale degree 5 was in that fully diminished 7 chord.
Yeah.
So
again,
what do you want to call that?
I should probably just not even try and call it anything. Maybe I would call it.
Yeah. Can't get one past you. It's not a 7 of 5, right? There's no F sharp in it to be a 7 of 5.
Yeah.
Because what were the notes of that? You did A sharp, C sharp, E, and G, right? Build that foot.
Mm-hmm.
And then moved that, the A sharp in the bass moved to B.
Mm-hmm.
And made a G7 over B chord, right? A 5/6/5.
Yeah.
And then back to 1 or whatever. So that you cannot call that 7 of 5. There's no F sharp in it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You cannot call that a common tone diminished 7 chord because none of those notes were in the chord that preceded it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What do you want to call it?
Shrug emoji.
Shrug emoji. Exactly. You call it shrug emoji.
The WTF chord.
A WTF chord. This chord was created by the actions of 2 things. This chord was created by the chromatic ascent of the bass line.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
A to A sharp to B.
Mm-hmm.
It was created by that and by the simultaneous motion of a tenor line that moved from C to C sharp to D.
Okay.
But this 7 chord did not function. It did not resolve to anything. This was the product of 2 voices, a tenth apart, in thirds, moving chromatically. A over C, moving to A sharp over C sharp, moving to B over D.
So A over C, moving that thing.
And those other two voices were doing their own thing. One of them was actually staying on. One of them was moving to G, right?
Mm-hmm.
And was the other one just staying on C? Well, no, C was moving to C sharp.
God, I don't know.
Yeah, it gets confusing. I'd have to go write it back down again.
Yeah.
but yeah. So that chord didn't have a function other than it was just chromatic motion. And you recall that we've always said, in truth, harmony is counterpoint.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. In truth, function is counterpoint. A 5 wants to move to a 1 because the notes of a 5 chord want to resolve into the notes of a 1 chord. It's just that was a relatively simple and very hemmed in kind of thing when we were talking about diatonics and you only had 7 notes, and There's only so many resolutions one way or another you could go. Now we've gotten into much tangier, spicier territory.
Yeah. And more nebulous territory, it seems.
And more nebulous territory.
Ambiguous.
Yeah.
It's like an ambiguous kind of chord.
Yeah, so you can see how this chord sort of, it a little bit brought the whole system down, right?
Yeah.
Because you now have a chord that doesn't have to have a function.
Yeah.
And, it's not so far a step to say, why do we care if this is a 7 or a 3 or a 7 or 5? It's just 7, right? Uh-huh. And then so it's not a big step to go, well, what did it matter what key we went to? We just went to a note, right? It's especially if what we're thinking of is counterpoint, not chords and keys, but not thinking vertically, chord, but thinking horizontally, 4 moving lines.
Yeah.
And then, it's not so far to think, well, who cares what key we're in anyway?
Yeah.
And then it's just a step to say, well, why are we thinking that way? Why not just write music and not worry about key? and then the 20th century happened.
Yeah, and then that kind of solidified that. A little bit.
Yeah. But it's just my personal pet theory, but I feel like the fully diminished 7 chord was sort of the mosquito that got stepped on that created all of that, right?
Oh yeah, like the butterfly effect or what?
Yeah,
the
right,
mosquito?
exactly. Yeah, it was like the like the how you always say you go back in time and you step on a mosquito and everything will just fall apart. Yeah. Discovering the fully diminished 7 chord was sort of the mosquito that got stepped on. And it was like, hey, I can go to any key from this thing, and then and everything just sort of falls apart.
Well, it's funny because now that we've done this episode, I will say this chord, despite how ugly it sounds, seems to be really the most useful in some ways. I mean,
ugly as a point of view, right?
Ugly playing it, well, yeah. But playing it all by itself. Hey, y'all. Hey, check this out, y'all.
Yeah.
Ooh, I'm going to do it 2 octaves.
That's an ugly chord.
That feels pretty tense. If I just started and stopped with that,
Yeah.
Now, if I do it in between something else, sure, Yeah, it's great. That made sense. Or I like the prolongation thing you were talking about. We did the... that's cool as hell.
Yeah.
But in terms of, being able to have it go to 4 different places successfully, thereby either tonicizing 4 different chords or modulating to 4 different keys. And then, like you're saying, just as a counterpuntal, just an effect, just a side effect of what else really going on in the overall music. Yeah,
and something we didn't touch on directly, chains of 7 chords, right? Where you're just moving like 7 of 7 to 7 to 7 of 2,
We did talk about that a little bit. I don't know if I can do this with fully diminished 7 chords, but I'll try and make at least the last one fully diminished. But say if we're in C and we want to make it up to something crazy like 5, G, but doing nothing but a whole chain of 7th chords till there, right? So key of C, and we just do like is a 7 of 2, and then we'll do 2 turns into a 7 of minor 3. Minor 3 turns into a 7 of sharp major 3, which is also diminished, going to 4, which is also diminished, going to 7 of 5, which is finally, hey, there's 5, and then 1.
It's a beautiful thing, huh?
Isn't it?
And you can sort of hear, too, how that was a whole stretch of chords where it was not at all clear what key you were in.
Yeah, let me do that again without talking. So it actually goes, so key of C. So we did this. Now we feel like we're somewhere, and then we can get back to 1. Interesting.
Yeah.
So that is a chain of 7 chords.
Right, basically, yeah.
That's probably not done very often. Although it sounded kind of cool. I can imagine use for it, like I think the video game music a little bit, like a tense Mario scene.
You might be surprised. You might be surprised how often things like that happen.
Yeah.
Again, go. If anybody out there is just looking for a good time, go attempt to analyze Chopin's E minor Prelude.
Okay.
which we have talked about it on the show before, if I remember correctly. But go attempt to analyze Chopin's E minor prelude and the diminished 7 chords that exist in that thing.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I would love to see what you come up with.
Is there a less busy composer? Chopin had a lot of dots on his staff paper. Lots of dots.
Lots of dots. Good one. Is there some other composer? Well, again, I mentioned Schumann. Any of the songs from Dicta Liebe. Go check those out and see what, just try to analyze those, see what you come up with.
Mm-hmm. Well, Matt, a question. Do you think this more or less wraps up our discussion on the fully diminished 7 chord?
I think we've pretty much covered it.
Man, what a chord.
It's one heck of a little chord. It should be reiterated just one more time that this does not work with the half diminished 7 chord.
Right.
Right. The half diminished 7 chord is asymmetrical. It has a distinct root. That doesn't make it not useful, but you can't do all this sort of stuff.
Yeah, you don't have all those possibilities that you would have had otherwise.
Right.
Right. Okay, so let us do a recap before we get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about, first off, the use of the use of the fully diminished chord as a secondary 7.
Right, yeah. And it can be a 7 of any chord whose root is a half step above one of its 4 notes.
Mm-hmm. And then we talked about as a common chord of a modulation.
Right, so that could be not just a secondary 7 chord, but you could actually go into that key that is whose tonic is a half step above any of those 4 notes. Or the next chord that is a half step above any of those 4 notes.
So whereas a secondary 7 chord, we're just talking about tonicizing a particular chord in the same key,
mm-hmm.
where we're going, and then now we're talking about using it as a common chord of a modulation to where it's going to tonicize, but also get us into a new key. Mm-hmm. Or it might tonicize another chord from the new key, right?
Mm-hmm.
It could be a 7 of 5 in the new key.
Yeah. Yeah.
And next up, we have as a common tone fully diminished 7 chord.
Yes, a chord who usually starts with the 1 or the 5, mm-hmm. Keeps the root of that chord common, holds onto that, and then builds a fully diminished 7 chord around that note.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I hear somebody out there asking, well, how do you know which fully diminished 7 chord to build is well, there's only one possibility, right? That is minor thirds, around that note, right? Because it's a symmetrical set. Mm-hmm. So there's really only one fully diminished 7 chord that'll have G, for example, as a chord tone. You can mess around with the enharmonic spellings, but there's really only one that's going to include that one.
Right. Very good. Very good.
And then it goes back. Then it goes back to the chord that created it.
In the case of a prolongation, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yes. Except for when it doesn't. And except for when you use that, you create a fully diminished 7 chord and then go to one of the chords or keys that is a half step above one of those chord tones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very good. And then we spoke a little bit about the enharmonic modulations using the diminished 7th chord.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say about that?
Just that all of that stuff I've just been saying is true.
Mm-hmm. And then what about in the case of its use as a contrapuntal element, the shrug emoji?
So there is a such thing as a fully diminished 7 chord that does not function at all. That is not a 7 of anything. That is not necessarily moving towards a particular chord, but is merely a product of chromatic lines. One or more voices. The bass voice is moving chromatically, ascending or descending, or one of the other voices are, or they're moving together in a chromatic function, and this chord is created by the process of that. But then they continue on moving, and it goes away.
It's incidental.
It is incidental.
You see it, it's there, and you just have to accept it.
Mm-hmm.
You can't sit there and say, okay, you can't, like me, I'm going to overanalyze it. You look at it up and down, backwards, forward, however you look at it, it's just there because it's there. And it happens to
again, Chopin Prelude in E minor. Go analyze that. That'll cure you of that.
Oh, yeah. That'll probably cure you of a lot of analysis.
Well, I'll tell you this. It's in E minor, and there is not an E minor chord until the very end.
Oh, fun. Wow. Okay.
There's a B major chord halfway through, and then there's an E minor chord right at the end, and that's it.
Oh, my goodness. So is it all just like a 1-5-1?
No, you tell me. Go analyze it and see what you come up with.
I'll get back to you that on episode 200.
I love giving Jeremy homework. This is my new this is my new hobby in life. Is I text him stuff and tell him to analyze it. And,
he took a screenshot with his phone. He sent me a picture. I had to sit here and zoom in and even see what's going on. That's awesome.
Yeah, this is my new hobby. This is my new pet project. I give Jeremy stuff and tell him to analyze, give him homework.
And I try to do it. I do.
All right. So that, I guess that pretty much, and then finally there was the idea of the sort of the chain of 7 chords, right? Where we're just moving 7 to 7 to 7 up a half step or down a half step, you know, as a way of completely disguising what key we're in.
Yeah, because you could just keep on doing that and then land anywhere, and then all of a sudden be like, haha, here I am.
Absolutely. Literally anywhere. Land literally anywhere.
Yeah. As long as you follow the chain and keep on moving to it, you know?
Yep.
Because you're not resolving after every chord, you're just moving to another diminished chord.
Yeah.
It's like crawling up your spine. Yeah, man. Love it.
So there you go. So I guess that pretty much, covers it.
Yeah. I guess that's maybe a wrap on the fully diminished 7 chord. Maybe at some point we'll think of something else we missed and just bring it up in passing. But as far as episodes and theory goes, the real deal. Yeah. Yeah,
that's it. I'll tell you that the fully diminished 7 chord is not the only chord that can be constructed via purely via contrapuntal elements and not function. There are other chords that also do that.
Mm-hmm.
But the fully diminished 7 is one big possibility of that.
Ooh, maybe it'd be fun to talk about those chords at some point.
I think we probably have to, now that we've spilled the beans on it.
Have we already? I don't know. We talked about borrowed chords, but that's still a function, right?
No, borrowed chords totally function. No, that's not. No.
Oh, boy. Okay, so there's more to talk about. All right.
Yeah.
Here we thought we were getting at the end of all the theory stuff.
We're never really at the end of the theory. It's just we may be the end of our own patience.
Yeah.
And speaking of which, we've probably tried all of your patience long enough. So have fun playing with those fully diminished 7 chords.
It really does open up a world of possibilities for those who are trying to compose and find ways to get to other keys and
absolutely
cool little tricky ways to get there. So
absolutely.
So yeah.
So next time is episode 100.
Yeah, man. I'm excited that this is like a landmark. You know, this is huge. You know?
I'm excited too. We'll see you all there for it.
Yeah, thanks for sticking with us, guys.
Congratulations. You've now unlocked a portal that can take your music anywhere. So go ahead. Jump on in. Don't forget to check out our merchandise by looking us up on redbubble.com. And of course, for questions or comments, contact us at info@musicstudent101.com.